Hey Solibus fam, I've got something special coming up. I'll be narrating horror stories from your state. Drop your state in the comments below, and you might hear a terrifying story from your own backyard soon. Let's get started. I've been in law enforcement going on 14 years now. In that time, I've seen some awful things: murders, overdoses, car crashes that still make me grit my teeth when I drive past the scenes. But nothing has ever gotten under my skin like what happened during a double call near Lake Eufaula about 2 years ago. I was working for the McIntosh County Sheriff's Office, and it started off like any other shift: paperwork in the morning, a domestic call around noon, and by late afternoon, I was just patrolling some back roads east of town. It was one of those overcast spring days where everything felt off before anything had even happened. You know the kind: sky's too quiet, air's too still. At around 4:17 p.m., dispatch put out a call about a single vehicle accident off a rural stretch called Morgan Road. That's maybe 15 minutes from where I was, so I called in and said I'd take it. According to the caller, a pickup truck had veered off the gravel shoulder and rolled down a shallow embankment. They thought the driver might be dead. When I got there, EMS was already on scene. The truck, an older F-150, was on its side against a tree. The windows were shattered, and the roof had caved in. The man behind the wheel was pinned underneath, face turned away, blood pooling around his upper torso. Fire was already prepping to lift the truck, but it was pretty clear the guy hadn't made it. His name was Jeremy Holt, 42 years old, lived about 30 minutes north in a little town called Checotah. He had a wallet in his back pocket, still intact. That's how we ID'd him. No signs of anyone else in the truck, no indication it was anything but a tragic accident. Maybe he overcorrected, maybe fell asleep. Happens more often than people think out here. We did our usual, took photos, documented the scene, bagged some debris, called for tow. I stayed behind to finish the report while the paramedics cleared the body. I remember noting the time of death as approximately 4:45 p.m. based on lividity in the EMS check. Nothing weird. Not yet. About 3 hours later, I was back at the station wrapping things up when dispatch called me directly. The operator, Haley, a younger girl, good head on her shoulders, sounded rattled. She said, "Hey, this is gonna sound strange. We just got another call from a residence in Checotah. Same name, Jeremy Holt." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. A neighbor called it in. Said she looked through the window and saw Jeremy Holt collapsed in the hallway of his home. No movement. Same name, same guy. Now at first, I figured it had to be a mix-up. Maybe a relative with the same name. Hell, Oklahoma's full of family-run properties. Or maybe the caller just misidentified someone. But still, something in her tone put me on edge. I told her I'd go check it out. The address was a modest ranch-style house tucked back in a wooded lot near Highway 266. When I pulled into the driveway, the neighbor, older lady named Doris, was waiting at the property line. She came up to the window and said, "He hasn't moved." I knocked, but he didn't answer. And the front door's locked. I walked up to the house and looked through the same window she had. Sure enough, there was a man lying face down in the hallway just past the front entrance. Same build, same clothes. I knocked hard, no response. I circled to the back. Locked, nothing broken, no sign of forced entry. At this point, I called it in as a welfare check and requested backup. While I waited, I kept looking through that window. I swear to you, I could feel something shift in my gut. The kind of feeling you get when you realize something's not just wrong, it's impossible. When backup arrived, Deputy Carroll, we breached the front door. And there he was, Jeremy Holt, dead. Again, face down, body cold, eyes open. The lividity didn't match what we'd seen at the crash. This time, he looked like he'd died lying peacefully in his hallway. No trauma, no visible wounds, no blood. But here's the kicker: the clothes were identical. Same jeans, same worn boots, same flannel shirt with that little grease stain near the cuff. Even the wallet in his pocket, same ID. I remember Carol pulling me aside and saying, "You're messing with me, right? We already cleared this guy off Morgan Road." "No," I told him. "We really didn't." The medical examiner was just as confused. We called to confirm the original body, the one from the truck, and yes, it was still in transport to the morgue. Still tagged as Jeremy Holt. Now, I know what you're thinking. Maybe it was a twin. Maybe Jeremy had a brother nobody mentioned. But it wasn't. There were no siblings listed in any of the files. No record of adoption. No fake IDs. Fingerprints from both bodies matched, 100%. Two versions of the same man, dead in two different places, within hours of each other. I sat in the parking lot of that second scene for what felt like forever, just staring at the steering wheel, trying to convince myself I hadn't missed something obvious. Then I remembered something that made my stomach twist. Back at the crash site, right before they towed the truck, I leaned down to grab a piece of broken mirror from the ground. Just then, the wind shifted and nudged the driver's door slightly more open. That was when I thought I saw the man's face for just a second. And I remember thinking at the time, he looked calm, not scared, not panicked like most crash victims. He looked like someone who knew, like he wasn't surprised to die. Over the next few weeks, things got stranger. Both bodies were autopsied. Both showed identical internal scarring, an old appendix removal, a cracked molar on the lower left jaw, even the same small tattoo behind the right ear. The me called me personally and said, "I've been doing this for 22 years and I have no way to explain this. These are not twins. This is the same man. Twice." The case was quietly archived. No official ruling. No press release. The Holt family was told there was a medical anomaly and asked not to speak to reporters. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. About a month later, I was called out to investigate a break-in at an empty rental cabin near the north end of the lake. When I entered, I found signs of squatting, an old sleeping bag, a few food wrappers, and something scratched into the wall with what looked like a nail. 7 words. All caps. No punctuation. It said, "I die again, you do nothing again." And underneath it, in faint pencil, someone had written, 8/19, Chakota. That was the day Jeremy Holt died. Twice. I moved to Oklahoma to get away. I'd just come off a bad few years, ugly breakup, stress at work, and a slow, quiet unraveling that started with not sleeping and ended with me selling off everything I owned in a half-hearted garage sale and heading south from Kansas in an old Chevy I barely trusted to make the trip. I didn't have much of a plan, just that I wanted something rural, peaceful, far from the noise. A fresh start. So when I found a rental listing for a little 2-bedroom house outside of Tahlequah, I jumped on it. Cheap rent, quiet land, no neighbors in sight. It was perfect. For the first couple of months, everything was fine. I was working odd jobs for a guy who owned a few construction crews out here. Framing, drywall, cleanup. Paid under the table, which suited me just fine. No one really knew me, and I liked it that way. Until the woman showed up. I first saw her at the gas station down by the highway. I was filling up when she pulled in on the opposite side. She was driving one of those pale blue Ford Focuses, the kind that looks beige in certain lighting. She didn't get out at first, just sat there, staring at me through the windshield. I thought maybe I was in her way. I gave a little wave. She didn't wave back. Then, as I was screwing the gas cap on, she stepped out and said something I couldn't hear over the pump. "Sorry," I called out. She smiled, a strange, stretched kind of smile. I said I didn't think I'd see you again so soon. I blinked. "Sorry, do I know you?" She didn't answer, just tilted her head a little and said, "You look tired. You still not sleeping good?" I was frozen for a second, not just because of the weird familiarity, but because, I hadn't told anyone around here about my insomnia. No one even knew my last name. I forced a laugh. I think you've got me confused with someone else." She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Don't do that. Not again." That was all she said before getting back into her car and driving away. I stood there for a minute, staring at her taillights as they disappeared down the road. That night, I brushed it off. Weird people exist. Maybe she was confused. Maybe she mistook me for someone else. It happens. But the next morning, she was sitting in her car at the end of my driveway. Just sitting there. I opened my front door, walked out halfway, and stopped. She didn't get out this time. Just cracked her window and said, "I made coffee. Want some?" "No," I said firmly. "You need to leave." She didn't argue. Just smiled, same stretched expression, and slowly reversed back onto the gravel road. That's when I called the county sheriff's office. They sent out a deputy, young guy named Briggs. He was polite but seemed more amused than anything. "She give you her name?" he asked. "No." "Did she threaten you or enter the house? Anything like that?" "No. But she knew things about me. Personal stuff." He nodded slowly, but I could tell he wasn't buying it. "I'll file a report. Let us know if she comes back." She came back 2 days later. This time, I saw her out the kitchen window. She was walking slowly up the dirt path toward my porch, holding something. A paper bag. I locked the door and told her to leave. She called through the door. I made banana bread. Your favorite. I didn't answer. She tapped her fingers against the glass. Remember? From your birthday. I used the same recipe. I waited until she left before I even opened the door. She'd set the bag down on the welcome mat. I kicked it into the yard without looking. I called the sheriff again. Briggs came out. He was less amused this time. She brought food. Yeah. Did you eat any of it? No. He took it with him to log as evidence, I guess. But before he left, he said something that still sticks with me. He scratched his head and muttered, "Man, I swear I've heard of this woman before." What do you mean? I asked. He shook his head. Don't know. Just something about this is ringing a bell. The next time I saw her was at my job site. We were framing a porch on a newer place out by Fort Gibson Lake. She pulled up like she belonged there. No hesitation. She looked right at me, smiled, and said, "You left your phone charger at the house. I figured you'd want it." I froze. I hadn't lost a charger. I walked her back to the car and told her to leave, that I was going to press charges if she didn't stop. That's when her smile finally dropped. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, and she whispered, "You think you're going to do this to me again?" Then she drove off. I didn't sleep for the next 2 nights. Every sound outside felt like footsteps. I stopped opening the blinds. I started sleeping with a hammer next to the bed. I drove to the sheriff's office myself that Friday. Briggs wasn't there, but another deputy, an older guy named Mallory, pulled me aside after I explained what was going on. He listened, quiet and focused. Then he said, "I think I know who you're dealing with." He disappeared into the back and came out with a thin manila folder. He slid it across the desk. Inside were a few reports, grainy photos, a hospital record. The woman's name was Claire Donnelly. She'd been picked up in Tulsa 4 years earlier for stalking a man. Different guy, different town. Same behavior. Claimed they were married. Said he'd abandoned her. Even forged documents to prove it. Was she ever committed? I asked. Mallory nodded. Psych hold. 60 days. They let her out. No family. No meds. No record of where she went after that. And now she's here? He nodded. Looks like it. I filed a restraining order. Didn't stop her. One night, about a week later, I came home and found my back door wide open. Nothing stolen. But someone had gone through my bathroom drawers. There were pictures missing from my wallet. She hadn't broken in. She had a key. I had the locks changed that same night. But the final straw was what I found taped to my front door the next morning. It was a photograph of me asleep in my bed. The photo was angled slightly, like it was taken from the hallway, and written on the back in careful block letters were the words, "Stop pretending." I didn't pack. I didn't call anyone. I just left. I drove straight north, didn't stop until I crossed into Missouri. Rented a motel under a fake name and stayed there for 3 weeks until I found another place 2 towns over under a new lease. I haven't seen her since, but sometimes when I can't sleep, which is often, I'll lie there in the dark and think about that photo, about how close she must have been to take it. And I wonder how long she was standing there before she clicked the shutter, and how many others she took that I never found. I've always loved camping. There's something about being completely cut off from everything, the cell towers, the noise, the pressure of work and schedules and bills. When you're deep in the woods, sitting around a fire, you start to remember how big the world really is. This happened 2 years ago in May. 3 of us, me, my buddy Logan, and his girlfriend Sierra, had planned a weekend camping trip along the Illinois River in northeastern Oklahoma. There's a stretch of land down there, not far from Tahlequah, where the river bends into a wide loop and forms a natural clearing. Logan and I had camped there a couple of times before. It's not on any official trail, and it takes some serious hiking to get to, so we were pretty confident we'd be alone. We parked our cars off a dirt access road, crossed a couple of miles of woods on foot, and set up camp right on the edge of the river. The weather was perfect, not too hot during the day, just chilly enough at night to make the fire feel good. That first night was normal. We grilled hot dogs, passed around some cheap whiskey, told dumb stories. By around midnight, Logan and Sierra had zipped themselves into their tent, and I stayed up a little longer by the fire, just enjoying the stillness. That's when I saw it. Across the river, maybe 50, 60 yards away, a small orange glow appeared in the dark. Another fire. It hadn't been there before. I would have noticed. At first, I thought it was just a group pulling in late. But then I realized no one had come by. No footsteps. No rustling through the trees. And that fire had appeared almost too quickly. Like 1 second there was nothing, and the next, it was just there. I figured maybe they were just being quiet. Didn't think much of it. But something about it rubbed me wrong, even then. The weirdest part? They had a tent too, almost exactly like ours. Same style, same shape, even the same color. I woke up the next morning before the others and crossed down to the river to get a better look. The fire was gone. So was the tent. Not a trace left on the other bank. No ash, no packed down brush, nothing. When I mentioned it to Logan, he just shrugged. Probably left early. Or maybe you imagined it. I didn't argue. The next night, we stayed up later. All three of us. Around 11:30, Sierra pointed across the river and said, "Oh, weird. Someone else is here?" Sure enough, the fire was back. Same spot. Same size. Same exact tent. Only this time, something was different. Their fire flickered in sync with ours. Like, exactly. When ours popped or shifted, theirs did too. And the tent, it was positioned at the same angle as ours, with the same shadows. It was like looking at a reflection. Except there was no water between us. Just the woods. Logan stood up and waved. "Hey, you guys just get here." No response. He shouted again. "Nice night, huh?" Nothing. Sierra said, quietly, "I don't think they can hear us." I don't know why, but that gave me chills. Then, without thinking, Logan grabbed a flashlight and pointed it across the river. He flicked it once, twice. The other fire flickered at the exact same rhythm. He laughed. "Okay, now that's creepy." Sierra was frowning. "Turn it off." He did. The three of us stood there for a while, staring across the water. No movement. No sounds. Just two fires crackling in sync. Eventually, we went to bed. But I didn't sleep. Every so often, I'd hear a twig snap outside. A footstep. Maybe two. Each time I unzipped the tent and looked out, there was nothing there but the fire across the river, still going, still in sync. In the morning, once again, the other site was completely gone. Now Logan was starting to get uneasy too. He kept saying, there's no way someone could pack up that clean and leave no trace. That afternoon, we debated heading out early. But we'd only booked the time off for the weekend, and Sierra wanted one more night. I didn't argue. I just quietly made sure my knife was closer than usual and left the rain flap on the tent cracked open. That night, we lit our fire early, before sunset. We waited. Nothing happened. For hours, it was just us, talking low, glancing across the river every few minutes. And then, around 2 a.m., Sierra gasped. The other fire was back. Only this time, there was someone standing beside it. We couldn't make out their face. Just a figure, tall, still, slightly hunched forward, staring straight across at us. I whispered, "Do you see that?" Logan nodded slowly. Yeah, the figure didn't move, didn't shift, didn't sit, just stood there. And then, Logan did something I still don't understand. He stood up and raised his hand. And across the river, the figure raised its hand too. Perfectly timed, perfectly mirrored. Logan lowered it. The figure did the same. It was copying him. I said, "That's not someone at the other fire. That's someone copying us." Then Sierra screamed, because another figure had stepped out of the trees behind our tent. We spun around and it was gone. Nothing there. We turned back toward the river. The figure across the water had moved. Now there were three, each of them standing in the exact positions we had been in seconds earlier. Like they were watching us. Like they were rehearsing us. We didn't stay. We grabbed what we could and hiked out with our flashlights, moving fast and mostly in silence. We didn't talk until we were back in the car, speeding down the gravel road like the devil was behind us. I don't know what we saw out there. I don't know if they were people, spirits, something else entirely. But sometimes at night, when I'm alone, I'll close my eyes and see that fire across the river. Still, mirroring mine. And I wonder if someone out there is staring into their fire right now. Watching me. The house wasn't supposed to be mine. It was my uncle's, a man I barely knew. My dad's older brother. Reclusive. Lived alone for decades on a patch of dry land in north-central Oklahoma, where the lake used to be before it drained out in the 90s. No one visited. He didn't want them to. When he passed, the land and the house ended up in my name. No will. No contest. Just keys in a padded envelope and a short note. Don't stay long. That should have been my first sign. I drove up a week later. Middle of summer. Hot, bone dry, the kind of heat that makes the horizon shimmer. The house sat at the end of a winding gravel path, surrounded by nothing but cracked earth and low brush. It was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just that low hum you hear when it's too still. The place was a single-story farmhouse, old wood and rusted tin, not much to look at. But it held that strange, suspended feel that certain places have, like time had forgotten it. I figured I'd stay for the weekend, clean it out, maybe fix what needed fixing, then decide whether to sell or let it rot. It wasn't until the second night that I noticed the window. It was in the back room. A narrow side room with bare walls and warped floorboards, no furniture except a small wooden stool and a busted lamp with a yellowing cord. The window faced the west, but not the road, not a view. Just the old lake bed. Miles and miles of dry, empty dust. And beyond that, nothing but a pale horizon. The window itself didn't fit. It was older than the others, thick, distorted glass, warped around the edges like something handmade. The frame was slightly too big for the wall, and the plaster around it was cracked, as if the house had tried to reject it at some point. But what got me wasn't how it looked. It was how cold it was. That house was like an oven during the day. Even at night, the heat clung to the walls. But when I touched the glass in that window, just curious, it was ice cold. Not cool. Freezing. Like the kind of cold you'd get pressing your palm to the inside of a walk-in freezer. I checked for drafts. Inspected the frame. Nothing. Just that same biting cold, radiating from a single pane of glass that looked out over an empty stretch of dust. I started sleeping in the living room after that. The next morning, I noticed something else. Footprints. Not boot tracks or shoes, just faint impressions in the dry soil behind the house, beneath the window. Bare feet. One set. Small. They led straight to the house, stopped beneath the window, and didn't return. No scuff marks, no turning around. Like someone had walked to the window and just disappeared. I didn't sleep much that night. I told myself it was just old paranoia. I'd been alone too long. I hadn't seen another person in days. But around 3 a.m., I was still lying there on the couch, wide awake, when I heard the creak. Not the wind. There was no wind. This was wood on wood. A slow, aching creak, like the shifting of pressure. Then, another. From the back of the house. I sat up, listened, held my breath. It was coming from the side room, that window. I crept down the hall, slow and quiet. The door to the room was half open. I could see just enough to make out the outline of the window in the moonlight. And I swear to you, it was open. Wide open. Swinging slightly on its rusted frame, but there was no breeze. I stood there, frozen. I hadn't opened that window. I never opened it. And I would have heard it. It didn't move silently. I reached in slowly and slammed it shut. Locked it. Then I saw it. On the inside of the glass, a handprint. Small. Smudged. Clear as day. Pressed from the outside. After that, I stopped going near the room. I kept the door closed. Started leaving the porch light on. But every morning, when I'd walk out back to check, there were more footprints. Each day, a little closer to the house. Each day, a little deeper, like whoever, whatever, was out there was getting heavier. Or more real. On the fourth night, I tried something. I left the window open, just a crack, set a chair facing it, and waited in the dark with a flashlight. Hours passed. Nothing. The night was dead silent, like even the air was holding its breath. Then, just after 2:30 a.m., the temperature dropped. Not a breeze, the air itself. A sudden wave of freezing cold, like walking into a freezer with wet skin. I heard the creak. Then, soft footsteps. On dry earth. Moving toward the house. My mouth went dry. I clicked on the flashlight, pointed it toward the window. Nothing. Just dust. An empty horizon. But the air inside the room felt like it had been sucked out. Pressurized. In the open window, it had frost forming along the edge. I slammed it shut, this time nailing a wooden board across it. Told myself I was being ridiculous, that I needed sleep. But the next night, something knocked. 3 slow taps on the outside wall, just beneath the window. Then silence. Then again, 3 knocks. Like someone trying to be let in. I didn't sleep. I waited for morning, packed a bag, and got the hell out. I haven't been back. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that room. That window. That impossible cold. And the bare footprints that led to the house, but never away. Like something found its way in, through a window that doesn't belong. And maybe it never left. I don't scare easy. I work nights. Always have. There's something about the rhythm of it, the silence, the empty spaces that calms me more than it unnerves me. People think night shifts are creepy, but most of the time, they're just boring. Until they're not. I was working custodial at a university hospital in Oklahoma City, not the big medical center, one of the smaller ones attached to the university campus. Low traffic. Mostly outpatient stuff. I worked the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, 5 nights a week. The job was simple: mop the floors, empty the trash, wipe down the elevators, clean the waiting rooms. Occasionally, I'd get sent to one of the restricted wings, usually closed-off labs or underused areas. Quiet stuff. The morgue was one of them. It was tucked away in the oldest wing of the hospital, down a narrow hallway that always smelled faintly like bleach and damp tile. The morgue was small, maybe 3 rooms total, with one hallway cooler lined with body drawers, a single steel autopsy table, and an office that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. They told me not to bother cleaning the cooler unless specifically asked. It's usually empty, my supervisor said. You'll know when it's not. And they were right. Most nights, that wing was dark, locked, and dead silent. Until that one night. I was pushing my cart down the hall just before 2 a.m. when I noticed something odd. The door to the morgue was slightly ajar. Not open, not locked, just enough to make me stop. Now, I've been doing this long enough to know how to play it safe. I knocked gently, called out, custodial, and waited. No answer. I figured maybe one of the doctors had been in and forgot to close up. I eased the door open with my foot and flicked on the lights. Everything looked normal, clean, cold, quiet. I was about to shut the door and move on when I noticed it. One of the drawers in the cooler room was cracked open, just an inch or two. Now, if you've ever seen one of these drawers, you know they don't open easy. They seal tight and pull heavy, like filing cabinets made for steel coffins. You don't just leave one open by accident. I stepped closer. The tag on the front read, "Unassigned." That's what they label the drawers when they're in use. I reached out and slowly pushed it closed. It made that low, hollow metallic thunk as it sealed. Didn't think much of it at the time. But later, around 4 a.m., I passed the wing again during my second round. And the drawer was open again. Same one. Same inch-wide crack. I stood in the doorway, staring at it. I hadn't seen anyone enter. No nurses, no techs, no gurneys. Just me and my mop bucket, making rounds in silence. I shut it again. Firmer this time. Then I left. The rest of the shift was quiet. But the whole time, I had that feeling in the back of my neck, the kind you get when someone's standing behind you, even when no one is. Next night, same route. Same time. And this time, when I approached the morgue, the door was wide open. Not just the drawer, the whole entrance. Lights on inside. I stopped at the threshold. Something was off. My cart, the one I'd parked in the main hallway, was inside the morgue, parked neatly beside the autopsy table. That thing weighs a solid 100 pounds when fully loaded. There's no way it rolled on its own. I stepped in slowly, looked around. Nothing. No people. No sound. Just that same drawer, cracked open. This time a little wider. I backed out, locked the door. Didn't finish the rest of the round. I told the day supervisor about it the next morning. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "We haven't stored a body in that wing in over a year." I asked him about the drawer. He said that whole cooler was disconnected months ago. They sealed the compressors. I didn't know what to say. That night, I debated calling in, but I didn't. Part of me needed to see if it would happen again. And it did. Only this time, the drawer wasn't open. It was pulled all the way out. Not empty. There was a bag on it, black, zippered, like the kind used for body retrieval. I swear to God, there was frost around the edges of the drawer, like condensation on glass. I backed out, locked the door again, called security. When they got there, they opened it with me. No bag, no drawer pulled out, just sealed steel, clean and empty. They gave me a look, one of those long shift, smirks. I didn't bother explaining. I stopped doing rounds past that wing. Requested a transfer to supply restocking instead. They let me. I didn't fight it. But here's the thing that keeps me up sometimes. A month later, one of the other custodians, a quiet guy named Neil, took over the old route. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to sound crazy. But after 2 weeks, Neil stopped showing up. They said he quit. No notice. Just vanished. When I went by his locker to clean it out, tucked between his boots and a roll of duct tape, was a single item. A drawer tag. It read, "Unassigned." and beneath it, written in pen, "Don't let it close."